I'm Michelle, and I've been a nurse for 15 years. And I love caring for people. I like the days that I can show up and laugh and joke with family. But in my career, I've also experienced a lot of trauma, and it's vicarious trauma from other people's pain and suffering, and not being able to process my own through it. So, from the time I experienced my first code and the feelings that come inside that you don't know what to do, that you're not enough, that you're not prepared enough, because nothing prepares you for the first time you come across a dead patient. And nothing quite prepares you for hearing somebody collapse in the bathroom and needing to call that code. And the more I'm learning about my nervous system and with Peter Levine's work in how we embody these emotions as energy, the fear that sinks in, that I don't know if I ever learned to process and let a lot of that go. In my nursing career, I have been at the bedside of ICU since 2013. I took my ICU training. So, probably about 10 plus years in the ICU, in which there has been some big events that also occurred in this time. So, not only the day to day events and stories, and the way some patient stories or patients' families just hit each of us differently. There is maybe some case or interaction that each of us remembers differently. My experience is not the same as somebody else's when it comes to nursing and caring for somebody. And I do recognize I am a highly sensitive person. I'm highly intuitive. I'm pretty emotional. Um, and so I can see how I've ended up feeling maybe on this burnt out or unable to process kind of what suffering is mine and what suffering is other people's that I've been exposed to over and over again for the years. And so I know this doesn't apply to everybody, and that is wonderful. But there's some aspects of it that will resonate with individuals differently. So in Saskatchewan here, I was in ICU during the Humboldt Broncos. And I was going home that day when we heard about the accident. And the code orange was called with multiple casualties coming in. And so I went home that night, knowing I was going to be back the next day, worried about my coworkers and what their night was going to be. Oh, worried about the families and the experience and the energy that was palpable, the fear, the worry, the preparation um, that settles into us, and the time and the sorrow and the grief that's kind of felt afterwards. Then honoring that these big events just showcase so much at once of something that happens individually every day and that we're exposed to every day. And so, how are we processing each individual one, patient, family, story, and how we're processing like larger amounts of suffering as well. So during COVID, we all buckled up and we were being called frontline heroes. We were. I'm glad that that term and that language maybe gave me the courage to keep on going and keep showing up. But I was scared shitless. And so I sometimes relive the day that we were getting our first anticipated COVID patient. And I looked up at the board and my name was on the patient. And I just went into the back and cried. And then I wiped it away and I put on my gear and I buckled up for it because that's what we were supposed to do. But that doesn't change that initial reaction. It doesn't change that initial emotion that was set in that then I had to suppress because I was proud, I was brave. I didn't want to let my coworkers down. This is what I'm supposed to do. And there's so many wonderful, strong moments throughout COVID and the Humboldt Broncos that staff were coming together and working together and being a team, and that is wonderful. But that doesn't change our emotional landscape that maybe we were suppressing. And that's what I didn't realize is how much was suppressed over the years in regards to it. That I started just being scared and living in fear of what my day was going to be like. At the end of the day, numbing it away, creating maybe unhealthy habits to avoid really thinking about it. And same as anyone during COVID, that fear, and then the relationship aspect of it. If we were having individuals within our inner circles that didn't have the same value, I was walking into a hospital to take on cases and deal with death and dying when people were saying it doesn't exist. And the moral and the ethical concepts that come and are created in our heads and in our spirit, um, the emotions again of like I am trying to suppress being like angry because I believe I'm doing a good thing. And I was helping people, but it doesn't mean I wasn't scared. And again, I go back to the work of Peter Levine and somatic experiencing, and that our body holds a score. And that became very real for me. My body is still holding on to a lot of vicarious trauma, topped on top of my own trauma. During the course of COVID, I had 2 miscarriages while working in ICU. And just showing up to work, knowing that I lost my pregnancy, but also that I had to show up to work because everybody's relying on me here. After my second miscarriage, I needed to have a D&C, and the next day or the day after, I was just back at work. My hemoglobin was 80. I was pale as a ghost, but I was just showing up to do my job, to stay numb to what was actually real, to ignore my emotional landscape. and just do. I haven't been a human being, I've been a human doer, and kind of just a lot of emotion and trauma stuck and unprocessed. So we talk about vulnerability. I'm going to talk about vulnerability because this takes a lot of energy and effort to be vulnerable and talk about a story, my story. And it doesn't align with everybody. Totally. Some people, I'm sure, don't have the same emotional storage regarding similar situations, and some do. But vulnerability is really about being willing to share, because I also know that there is people that experience the exact same thing, that are currently experiencing the same thing, that maybe aren't even listening to their bodies, but maybe that fear state, that sympathetic state of the nervous system is just so stuck that when we go into work, we're in a sympathetic state, not knowing what the day is going to hold, unpredictability, almost that fear of what the day is going to bring. And we can't label that. So instead, I feel maybe overwhelmed, or I feel exhausted by the day, or I'm having numbing behaviors um, to just avoid what I'm really sensing and feeling. And then at the end of the day, we just collapse. Our bodies scream for us to turn off. And so it doesn't leave much extra energy for anything that feels like it brings joy or space into our lives. It doesn't leave a lot of space for cultivating anything that feels empowering, that feels like joy. So I share my story to create awareness about vicarious trauma, about how caring for others, hearing their stories, witnessing suffering, working with families experiencing loss affects everybody differently. And it's okay. It's okay to be more sensitive to some of it, because at some point in time, we do have to unearth and process some of our experiences in a different way. And I hope that I can be part of creating spaces for people to explore and understand parts of them that aren't even them. Some of the weight that I carry is mine, but I also carry the weight of a lot of death and pain that I've borne witness to. And it's part of my job to figure out how I can process that differently. And, you know, those numbing behaviors for me, drinking a bottle of wine, that's not how I want to go forward anymore. It was, and it worked for a long time for me, but now it doesn't align with my values. It's not how I want to show up as a mom. It's not how I want to show up as a nurse, because when I show up as a nurse in the state of numbing or fear, I'm also not providing the care that I want to as a nurse. I'm not connected to enjoyment in the job or passion in the job as much because I'm in a state of fight or flight and just trying to protect and numb myself. So I think there's just a lot of conversation to start and a space that needs to be created for us all to be willing to be vulnerable and create some self awareness of how caring for others can affect us and creating a safe space within ourselves to process these in different ways. So I'm going to keep trying and keep showing up vulnerably and authentically because nurses, caregivers, health providers, I think a lot of us are maybe struggling, and there just needs to be more spaces that we can talk openly about.